The Great Recession of 2008 was the most devastating economic crisis the U.S. had experienced in 75 years. The U.S. economy at the time was particularly vulnerable because of risk that permeated the system and yet was largely hidden, heavily indebted households and financial firms, and a large housing bubble. With the spark of the Lehman Brothers failure on September 15, 2008, this economic vulnerability quickly morphed into economic collapse. Over the next couple of years, over $16 trillion worth of wealth vanished. 4 million homes were foreclosed on, and hundreds of thousands of businesses failed. Also, almost 9 million workers lost their jobs. That's about 6% of the entire U.S. labor force. Millions more were forced to accept part-time jobs when they wanted full-time work, or were so discouraged by their job prospects that they stopped looking altogether. Not only was this economic crisis severe, it was long-lasting. Here, I've plotted both total production and employment in the U.S. relative to their values in the fourth quarter of 2007. The shaded area represents the official period of the recession. As you can see, total production in the U.S. would remain below its 2007 level for 4 years. And it would take 7 years for the number of people employed in the U.S. to catch up to where it was in 2007. In response to the devastation wrought by the Great Recession, the U.S. Federal Reserve and the U.S. government both undertook extraordinary measures to help revive the economy. These measures were large and controversial. The U.S. Federal Reserve, for example, undertook 2 major policy actions to stimulate the economy. First, the Fed pushed a key short-term interest rate essentially to zero, and then publicly committed to maintaining this low rate for years. Second, the Fed printed $3 trillion and used these newly created funds to purchase financial assets from banks and other financial institutions. This purchase represented the largest increase in the Federal Reserve's balance sheet since World War II. The intent of both of these policies was to reduce long-term interest rates in order to lower borrowing costs for companies and households. These reduced borrowing costs would then encourage companies and households to spend more, purchases that would help stimulate the economy. The U.S. government also enacted 2 major policies to help the economy recover from the Great Recession. The first policy, passed in October 2008 during President George W. Bush's administration, was the Troubled Asset Relief Program, also known as TARP. TARP committed up to $700 billion of taxpayer money to help stabilize banks, and so encouraged them to continue providing credit to companies and households. The second major policy, passed in February 2009 during the first month of President Obama's term in office, was the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, otherwise known as the stimulus. This $832 billion initiative combined increased federal spending with tax cuts and grants to state governments. It was meant to boost employment and income while simultaneously providing aid to those hurt most by the recession. Now that some time has passed and the data has been analyzed, we can finally better understand the Great Recession, both its causes and the policies it generated. Over the next half-dozen episodes, I'll describe to you exactly that. First, I'll go through what economic factors led to the Great Recession. Then I'll describe the timeline of the economic crisis. Finally, I'll go in depth into the policies chosen to help the economy recover. By the end of this series, we'll understand which policies worked as intended and which didn't. Thanks for watching.